So welcome everybody to this Generative AI webinar. Really excited to be here. Gibran and Jason discussing Generative AI, and it could scarcely be more relevant and topical time as news is flooding in from Bletchley Park on pretty unique global discussions and conversation around exactly this topic. So hopefully we'll be able to make some good progress in this conversation. The objectives of the session are, one, to understand the background of what Kolleno and Workiro products offer, and particularly in respect of generative AI, to discuss the evolving role and the challenges that CFOs currently face and how that intersects with the various solutions and generative AI that is constantly changing. And then we'll have a sort of moderated discussion to unpack those topics further, and hopefully through that period we'll receive some questions, and so feel free to put those in the chat as we go, and we'll either pick those up as we go if topical, or we'll leave them to the end and then cover them in a Q&A session at the end. So that's the session for today. Just as a way of introduction, my name is Francis Yates. I'm a director in BDO and driving our response to generative AI. My history is within finance functions and helping senior finance leadership and IT leadership develop strategy and execute operationally across very large sort of FTSE 100s and much smaller organisations too. And I'll hand over to Gibran and Jason to introduce themselves.
Certainly. Thank you, Francis. Hello, everyone. My name is Gibran Larabeer. I am Chief Financial Officer here at Kolleno. We are a financial operations platform that looks to help CFOs and finance teams to streamline their financial operations by helping to bring together, receivables, payments, and reconciliation onto one platform. So AI and generative AI certainly key topic for us as an organization, as well as for our clients as well. So happy to connect with the audience and share through some perspectives from our team.
I am Jason from Workiro. My role here is looking after channels and partnerships. We're a software company that's been doing document management and portal technology for the professional service industries since the late 90s. And over recent years, we've built new applications to help businesses to manage the current data, both structured and unstructured, that happen within professional service organizations and finance teams, all integrated with their sort of best-of-breed products. But we'll go through that later on. But thank you very much for having me, and thanks very much for everyone's attendance and attention. It's great.
Thanks, Jason. That's great. And just before we dive in, I think it's worth just defining what do we mean by generative AI. Generative AI is a broad label, and it's used to describe any type of artificial intelligence that can be used, and the clues in the name of generative, to create any new text, images, and you see that with text with the likes of ChatGPT, images with DALL-E, but also video, audio, code, or other sort of synthetic data. So it's a broad term and a sub category of artificial intelligence more broadly. I think it's worth also saying, given the outputs that we're getting from Bletchley Park right now, the statement that has been signed by those leaders, and I think this will come to form a framing of generative AI as we go forward, that ultimately the benefits and the huge improvements in efficiency that it will bring need to be balanced with a human centricity, trustworthiness, and a responsible usage. So that's the statement that's just been signed sort of this afternoon by those world leaders, and actually all of those elements, in particular the sort of responsible element, i.e. sort of responsible AI and trustworthiness, are absolutely crucial. So I think we can come back to those sort of three categories that have been, are now extremely topical, and will form of framework for AI sort of going forward, as you know, as a society, we seek to grapple with the huge potential, but managing the risks at the same time. So moving into the first section, I first wanted to talk about the key challenges and the evolving role of the CFO. So within the context of a modern finance function, we absolutely see a significant number of challenges, whether that's tiny upstart to the largest organizations with huge multiple ERP instances, etc. And in all of those scenarios, even in the most advanced, you still see a lot of manual processes, a broad, wide and widening remit of finance teams, so more and more coming under their responsibility. In general, and this is especially true of the clients that we service at BDO, a lot of sort of outdated legacy processes, a myriad of sort of legacy systems that have been stitched together, and sort of disparate interfaces between them, as well as sort of documentation sitting in lots of different places, different formats. And I'm sure Jason will talk about that sort of structured, unstructured data challenge as well within his section. So what that means in terms of the role of the CFO. So obviously the number of stakeholders that CFOs are addressing is risen considerably, and you really see this within ESG and reflected in the wide variety of users of information that is reported by organisations of all size. So investors and financial stakeholders, your sort of traditional key stakeholder group, but increasingly customers and employees, your wider community, are as important. And certainly the UK corporate governance reform that the government has been developing, and we're expecting some primary legislation announcement in the King's Speech next week, really brings to the fore that importance. A kind of SOX type regulation that's not only for listed companies, but for broader companies that have a broader societal impact, and that's in response to a lot of large scale bankruptcies that have impacted customers and impacted employees. So this is something that CFOs are at the front of having to sort of navigate, and increasingly taking on this role for the whole business, and not purely for finance, but for the reporting of these things. It's a natural sort of fit with a CFO kind of skill set, but the responsibility and accountability is just continually widening. So the likes of sort of carbon disclosures, or gender pay gap, all that sort of stuff tends to come through the finance function or part areas of it. So that role is increasing significantly. And then obviously regulation, a lot of the response to regulation does come up through the CFO, whether that's through compliance or risk or control areas, and the sort of discipline and the approach, leveraging data, understanding process and control, and using technology to optimize all of that is crucial, and a kind of natural skill set for the CFO. And that's why a lot of those challenges are being given to the CFO, and the CFO's plate's getting larger and larger and larger, and increasingly responsible for strategic decisions, because so much is flowing through that finance function, and taking on what I view as much more of a chief operating officer sort of overlap, and even parts of the CEO role. So a really broad and increasingly dynamic and changing environment, with a lot of inputs, whether they're people, financial, your classic product, and having to convert those to a number of stakeholders, and ultimately driven by value. So Jabril, if you could click to the next slide, that sets the scene of the kind of expectation that the CFO needs to navigate between these 4 areas that sort of push and pull them in different areas. And most change initiatives, even within an IT space, are crucial to be sort of not only overseen from a financial point of view, but in terms of managing change effectively through that finance function. So that the guardian of risks, particularly as it relates to change, but also enterprise risk management more widely. So strategic risks generally sort of fall under this as CFO remit, and increasingly you see that responsibility sitting there, and the audit committee and CEO looking to the CFO as being not necessarily the owner or accountable for those, but absolutely the steward for bringing those together and bringing the mechanisms and being the providing sort of methodology and oversight and discipline to report and monitor. Steward of assets in the same way, in terms of a strategic advisor, and the CFO and the finance functions increasingly taking on that independent role to sort of challenge the business. They've always had a role from as the sort of holder of the purse strings, if you like, within an organisation to challenge the business on return on investment and value for money. But increasingly that's translating into strategic advice. And then, as I said, reporter of performance, and that's not only financial, it's really building on that financial expertise, which is the sort of core capability, but putting it into performance more generally. And so much of that is driven by data and leveraging tools. And this is why the generative AI discussion is so important, because actually the amount of power that the generative AI suddenly provides in terms of leveraging a really good data set, and this is something that I'm sure Jabron and Jason are going to drill into, is vast and can really provide a huge amount of efficiency. And as the OpenAI CEO characterizes, it's really providing intelligence at a much lower cost point, and that's really the win with generative AI. So that's the sort of oversight. What that means in terms of the skill set for the CFO, a much broader set of skills than even sort of 10 years ago you would have considered relevant for a CFO. So, really advanced stakeholder management, increasingly sort of consulting skills, thinking strategically and managing change across the organisation more broadly, core project management and change management skills, all within obviously the ethics and within the culture of the organisation. And that's across all four domains of financial acumen, business acumen, value, and data as being absolutely crucial within 99% of modern organisations. So yeah, that's a sort of setting a scene of this sort of dynamic, challenging context that CFOs are operating in, some of the ways that they are challenged within that environment. I'll now hand over to Jabron to speak a bit more about the context.
Perfect. Thank you, Francis. And I think, going to your point with regards to the changing role of the CFO, as you mentioned, there's changing expectations, changing skill sets. And I think what goes, closely hand in hand with that is technology, and the role that technology is playing, as part of the finance tech stack that CFOs and finance teams are utilizing, and what's it's enabling them and empowering them to do. So, in a recent survey, about 42% of CFOs, said that their companies are now starting to experiment with Gen AI, and percentages are also sharing, utilizing that as a basis to start making investments and start exploring, potential applications. So, for the finance teams, technology is definitely at the fore. There's significant potential there, and there are certainly opportunities where we see, some high potential kind of use cases within that. When we're talking to CFOs, within our team, and also when we're talking with CFOs and some of our own clients, for the key areas that we often hear about in terms of potential applications cut across everything from budgeting and financial forecasting, financial reporting and analysis, credit and risk assessment, and also optimizing customer experience. And I think, Francis, this really ties back to the point that you raised around, the shifting role, the shifting number of stakeholders, within that are working closely with finance teams. Now, I think I would say right now more than ever, the role of the CFO is balancing both, the internal finance needs of their organizations, but also, taking a much more kind of external facing role, working with clients and trying to find ways to optimize the client experience. And so, there's certainly a number of different applications that cut across. And in terms of Gen AI, I think what we're seeing, today is a lot of, kind of initial exploration into certain areas that are really focused around narrative generation, helping to develop narratives around investor presentations, things like that. But I think, as it continues to evolve, we're going to see, much more sophisticated applications going into, budgeting and forecasting, scenario planning, et cetera. So I think very exciting time, quite a bit going on within and across finance teams, a lot of interest in this area. And so it's, how do we kind of take the first step? If you're exploring that, how do you continue down that path? And how do you do so in a way that's responsible and sustainable for your own organizations as well? And I know we'll get into that as we get into the moderated discussion as well. But Jason, maybe I'll hand it over to you because part of it is the implications that this is having within the finance teams, but it's also about how finance teams are also interacting within their organizations with other departments and other realms as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jabron. So this picture here, hopefully, or more than likely, is a scenario that's very common in most businesses these days. There has been an explosion of tools for the modern knowledge worker or, quote, old office worker that is now obviously mainly working from home with a bit of hybrid working. But what's that got to do with AI, I hear you say, but stick with me for a second. Now, at Workiro, we've been collaborating with finance teams and various departments in professional service companies for a couple of decades now, as I mentioned earlier. We've been handling documents and processes and tasks, and while some of them have got excellent systems for dealing with that, those structured processes and data, there is a significant amount of unstructured work and data that remains in the form of email conversations, PDFs, Word document, Excel files, and lots more. But they're all tucked away in various disparate systems, as Francis was talking about earlier. But why is this so crucial for this conversation today, you may wonder? Well, it's essential to consider this within the context of AI, specifically generative AI. Think of AI models like ChatGPT, which take a diverse set of data inputs, learn from them, and respond intelligently based on the questions asked or the information provided. For example, this 3 minutes of me talking is actually come from ChatGPT after I chucked my script through it and it corrected all the words I should be using, apart from that little section. But if you can go on to the next slide for me, Jerome. What we have done at Workiro is build a solution that allows you to take your entire company information and imagine what sort of questions you could ask it if it had all of your emails, documents, PDF, Excel files, as well as your structured data from your CRM, your finance system, your ERP system. There'd be no more sifting through emails or trying to figure out if a customer had responded. It would all be streamlined. That's precisely what we're doing with AI at Workiro. We're moving towards a vision where all of your records, communication files, and unstructured data are organized in a structured manner. And this enables us to harness your business's ultimate knowledge, which is a unified system. We've been using AI to suggest where to file documents and how to manage them and summarize its content for a while. But envision being able to summarize an entire customer interaction or team collaboration, breaking down all of the silos that often exist between those different departments. We're not stopping at internal use either. We see that customers and suppliers are obviously a key part of most business processes. And this means that you can gauge sentiment in the language customers are using when responding to messages, and whether they are swiftly signing documents or causing delay can all show very clear and intelligent paths for you to make really great business decisions. It's all about leveraging AI to help businesses consolidate their data into one or fewer systems. This way you can stand a better chance of harnessing all of the intelligence that you have. Imagine when every new member of staff begins at a business, you can give them all of the emails that have ever been sent by any of their colleagues in that department in an instant. You could download it. That's what AI will be giving your businesses in the future, rather than having your data scattered across multiple tools. So in conclusion, on this point, or on our point from Workiro today, consolidating your data into a single system powered by Gen AI not only streamlines it, but it does really strengthen governance and risk. This unified approach ensures compliance and proactive risk identification. Just pause for a second. Imagine your systems being able to detect when a member of staff has shared something they should not, even if it's by accident, or when a customer is interacting in a way that has shown that they are at risk, or even better, when they're likely to buy something more from you or take another service. So let me leave this point on the last thought. As AI changes the game for your staff and discovering data, and more importantly, stories within your data, how confident are you today that your access and segregation of duties, are 100% perfect? There have been, how do you know that there's been no human errors in the past? Now, what if I was to tell you that by bringing that data into a system that was AI enabled, that AI could find it for you and secure it for you automatically? Okay, back over to you, Francis, to delve further into the key consideration for today's businesses when it comes to AI.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jason. So I think in terms of the discussion, obviously it's exciting that there's so much attention on this, and we can't hope to have a more sort of hyped technology, certainly that I remember. And I think it's good to think about it in terms of the not only the opportunities but the risks, and a lot of organizations are that starting point. I think there's so much that, as Jason explained there really articulately, there's so much value and huge efficiencies and benefits, but it's about balancing that up, and how do we make sure that we're addressing those risks in a way that works for the organization, for its customers, and wider stakeholders. So I think, Gibraltar, if I can come to you first and ask, from that perspective, what does responsible AI mean to you? And I think in the context of the Bletchley sort of declaration that's just been released, obviously responsible is in there as well, but we also have human-centric and trustworthy. So what does that mean to you? And I guess thinking about that in the context of how you're working and exploring the technology too.
Yeah, and I think for us it means a few different things. I think there are a number of different considerations, especially as you're looking at AI and Gen AI, and we've listed a few of them here. But I think some of the things that really come to mind when we talk about AI and kind of its responsible implementation, really focused around kind of these four key elements. I would say it's data privacy and security. How do we make sure we safeguard sensitive financial data? Regulatory compliance, how you make sure you're compliant. But I think the last two in particular are really focused in on some of the key elements that you're talking about, Francis, which is as we take a look at responsible AI and its implementation, how do we ensure that we utilize data that helps to address potential biases? How do we look at that within the data? How do we manage and mitigate against that? And then how do we ensure the quality of data to really give us some reliability in outputs? And so I think there's a few different considerations around it. I think it's how do we maintain data privacy and security? How do we make sure that the data that we're using is mitigated against key biases and also ethical implications? And so I think there's steps that organizations can really take around this. Which is, I think, having a very clear idea of where you want to go with, your implementation of AI and Gen AI, and then establishing some guidelines or frameworks, really, to help ensure, the responsible kind of implementation and application of that, that helps to safeguard all of these key elements, and helps to ensure, that it's being applied responsibly as you go forward. But maybe Jason, interested to see your perspective from Workiro.
Yeah, I think that the best thing we've done internally as a business, rather than just what we're doing with our product, is we're a publicly listed software company under ISO 27001 compliance. It's interesting that to go through that process, something that we recommend our customers do as part of implementing software like ours, is to create a data map of all of the systems that they have, but more importantly, what data does it hold? So if you have a system over here that you've put in for project management, for instance, which is a small subscription piece of software for just a department of 10, are you storing documents and critical information in there? It's okay if you are, but as a business, you should be aware of where your data's held. And creating that map and maintaining it as a business is a great way to then build your risk on top of it, because that obviously will highlight things that you should and shouldn't be seeing, or where's our weakest link, if you like, from an exposure perspective. And all of those put you in great stead for applying extra intelligence on top of it, because ultimately, if you're going to start to trust some of that, albeit with quality assurance from humans, then you need to make sure that you know what is where, and make sure that you've got controls in place to discover when it's not there. I think that from my perspective on the data privacy and security is there. And the other bit you mentioned as well, and we've mentioned a couple of times today, is the human quality assurance of data. I got caught out myself this week with anyone that might have turned on we're using Zoom here for this webinar, but I did a meeting and turned on the Zoom AI companion for meeting notes. Anyone that's done that knows how awesome it is. It sends you a transcript, a very short 30-second transcript of an hour-long meeting, but it does mention what you started the conversation with. So, if you are having an off-the-record conversation on Zoom, it doesn't say recording, but you want to check before you start forwarding that on to other people what's in there, for sure, even if it's just to save people time about, your latest holiday. So, that's a great example of making sure that there is still a human aspect to checking what's coming out of the other side of it.
Yeah, I think they call that human in the loop, don't they? That's the sort of acronym, but I think that's really crucial, and I think that kind of goes to the sort of trustworthiness point in the Bletchley Declaration. And I think that's also a source of resilience as well. And Jabril, it'd be good to get your perspective on that in terms of what the extent to which you maintain a human element within this, and the extent to which that is, responsible AI and really embodying that it's responsible for the organization, but also for the output that's going to your stakeholders.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Jason. I think the key point, especially as you're in the earlier stages of implementation, I think you want to make sure that you still have that human element, that human kind of judgment. And even as you progress, right, and as you continue to build out, and you get kind of more reliable, outputs from your data, you still want to have, I find that human kind of element, that human safeguard, to be able to check in, and make sure that the information that you're using, the information that's generated, is kind of aligned, is free from some of the biases, and in line with some of the ethics and the frameworks that each organization sets within its own organization around the responsible usage. So I think that's key. And I think we'll continue to see that as we go forward. And I think especially within the finance function, having that human element is key. When you have very sensitive financial data, and you're trying to look through how you can utilize that to build up decision making and inform decisions for leadership, I think that's fundamental.
Can I just ask on that point? I think data privacy, is such an important element, not least from a sort of GDPR regulatory perspective. But how are you working with your customers to, I guess, help make sure that they're comfortable, but also that their customers are comfortable around that data privacy? What sort of some of the consideration?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that's very much top of mind for us, from a privacy perspective. So we've put in safeguards, within our platform, just to make sure that everything is, very much protected. Similar to Workiro, we've also done ISO 27001. So that has been fundamental for us. So utilizing those processes and those methodologies to make sure that we're maintaining information security, and we're maintaining data privacy, I think is key. It's at the fore for us, and I think it's at the forefront for a lot of our clients. I think when we think about especially the application of AI and Gen AI, I think some of the questions that we often get from clients is, okay, we want to go along this journey, but how do we make sure that the data that we utilize remains, private, remains secure? And so this is top of mind for, I would say any CFO and finance team member. And so, it's trying to put in those safeguards, and make sure that you have those in place, and have those frameworks in place to really make sure that everything is secure and maintained well for those teams, so that they can protect that information and use it internally and reliably.
Yeah, brilliant. So just changing gears a little bit, and I'll just come to you, Jason, on what would you say to CFOs in terms of and finance teams, and where can they start? Where can they start with this? Obviously, there's that stat of sort of 42% are exploring it. What would be your advice in terms of that, starting point?
Yeah, I would definitely make sure that I had a system and data audit in place, that or I started one. That ISO 27002 is the the application of that, and guidance for how to do those things. You don't have to be certified and go through an audit to be able to read a document and do what they suggest for certain sections. So my recommendation would be to make sure that you know exactly where your data is, where your files are. Make sure that you have controls and policies and systems that try to negate, where possible, the ability to make a human mistake by sending, the wrong Francis, the wrong tax return for the wrong BDO, for instance. Would be really important to make sure that you've got controls in place. Unlike email, that is, the wild west of communication, most applications now have some controls in them that help you as a business mitigate the risk of data leaks and exposure. Our software and many others, I will add, have a lot of tools to help you to do that. So I would contact my key vendors and ask them what they have in place to help me to do that.
Got it. And Gibran, sort of same question to you. What would be your starting point advice?
Yeah, and I think Jason touched on some of the critical elements around making sure you have your systems and data and some of the key considerations around that. I think from a leadership perspective, I think as companies are thinking about taking the first step, I think it's taking a step back and just really starting to define, a really clear vision about where it is that you want to go and what key outcomes you want to achieve. I feel like in some instances there's a lot of pressure to kind of jump forward and try to move as fast as you can, and I think there's certain merits to that. But I think taking a step back and just having a clear idea of what are some of the pain points that we have right now. What are some of the potential use cases that we see? What are some potential initial steps that we can take and initial applications that we can take to really test this out, see how it works for us, and then just have a clear sense of what outcomes you want to achieve and where you want to go for it. So that way you have a kind of more holistic approach to jumping in and taking advantage of a lot of the developments that we're seeing.
Got it. And Jason, any sort of tips on creating that vision from a sort of leadership perspective? Any considerations around capabilities, etc.?
Yeah, you could just chuck it all into Chat GPT. Be done with it. But yeah, no, in all seriousness, you've got again, if you get a diagram of all your where all your systems are as a management team, C-suite, that you come together with your attitude and risk profile to using your software, make sure you're getting return on investment from all of the software that you're investing in heavily, particularly the main process, whether it's an ERP system or a CRM. The other thing I would point out is the amount of customers that we come across that are not utilizing all of the functionality of the systems that they currently invest a huge amount of money in is probably the biggest amount of easy wins they can get. And already the likes of Oracle, in example in NetSuite in their recent Suite World announcement, it was all about Gen AI. But if you haven't got it turned on or got the other bits thing, you can't necessarily leverage it. The software does it, but you've got to keep on top of how those software companies are moving. I think that's the main thing. You've got to make sure you've got people in the business that are looking to do continual improvement with the software that you've got. If that's their job, they'll stay on top of it and they'll report up to the C-suite to make decisions on which ones to use and how to use them.
Yeah, and that sounds like quite a sort of cultural, it's a mindset thing within the organisation, right? Because it's never over. It's about, you know, constantly thinking and challenging and embracing, being ahead of the curve. In terms of so just thinking through some more practicalities, and obviously we're quite early days. Have you got any sort of war stories in terms of sort of fails? So, you know, project fails, whether it's, you know, early stage or late stage, but, you know, lessons that we can learn from in terms of where things have gone wrong in your experience.
I mean, I can take that from our perspective. It wouldn't necessarily be our project that had gone wrong, but obviously we, as a document management company, we're often taking data from different sources and importing them and migrating them into ours. And often we're finding data in those sources that shouldn't be there. And they are sometimes very sensitive information, potentially HR related or VIP customer related. Let's say you're doing you know, some financial work that one of the customers happens to be a rock star or something, and people shouldn't find out about the loan they got to get their new flashy car that's on the front of the papers. That's just sitting in a folder with that name on it. The stuff in it secured, but the name is written on it. We've had many examples of where those data audits have not been done, and so therefore those AI would pick up on that, by the way, in 3 or 4 years' time in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and I think from our perspective, I think, you know, I can take a look back at my years in the consulting industry prior to startup. I think one of the key things that we would often see in implementation is, you know, as you pull together, you know, a number of the different pieces of data, especially for CFOs and finance teams, what you would find is partial data, pieces of data, you know, really kind of missing, and you know, as Jason mentioned, not necessarily being cleansed. And so as you're going through and you're trying to utilize that to inform decision making, to inform, you know, presentation to internal and external audiences, and all of this, you know, you'd find that would then lead to you know, kind of flawed results, right? Flawed outputs. And so that's why I think, going back to your point, Francis, really having that you know, human element to complement that is key. I think technology is a key partner and can help you to automate and kind of optimize your processes and help to provide you with key insights when applied you know, correctly. And I think that human element and that human judgment really comes in to help prevent when those situations arise.
Yeah, agreed, definitely.
Absolutely. So you know, it's a real sort of garbage in, garbage out, you know, starting with the, you know, the hard sort of data reality, but then also the sort of culture over the top is as crucial as well.
Yeah. And I think Francis, on top of that, Francis, just to add, is a great point. It's not people's fault, right? It just means the tools we've had over the last 15, 20, 30 years in business have not helped us to govern those things. It's easy to make human errors. Nothing's finding them unless someone stumbles across them manually or searches for them specifically. Nothing is proactively helping us with our compliance and our governance. That is changing massively with AI. That is a big. We sit around the table and talk about our strategy for our product. It's not about how we look after documents. It's how we help customers to take their procedures and their policies and make sure that we can help them achieve it.
Yeah.
And even then, I think within, you know, for example, if we're talking about, you know, the kind of receivable spaces, you know, how do you actually work with, you know, clients to think through, you know, from a technology perspective, what are some of the pain points that really need to be addressed? How do you kind of utilize technology and optimization to be an automation to help them kind of work through that process? And what strategies can you kind of put in place to help kind of expedite and alleviate that as you move forward, right? And so that's part of that is, you know, a lot of the lessons that are learned kind of previously and are being pulled in by the tools. And part of it is, you know, as you continue to build, as you continue to build that muscle and get that experience, right? And get that additional data and insight, continuing to refine as you move forward.
Yeah. And just coming back to something you said there, Jason, on, you know, 3 or 4 years' time, thinking about the sort of that vision of, you know, what it's going to look like, that to what extent, and it's something I've been sort of mulling with, that, you know, for years we've been, you know, trying to fix systems that have grown, systems landscapes that are diverse, and bringing in new systems that will replace different ones, and trying to, you know, continuously improve incrementally. To what point do you, on that vision piece, do you see a situation where actually the technology is so powerful that it can just make do with that kind of legacy landscape, and actually that just be a kind of fix all over the top? Is that a kind of a vision that you see, that it can get to that point? Or do you think we're always going to be sort of hamstrung by, you know, some of the challenges that we have today?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. From our perspective, I can only talk from our own angle. Our product, before we sort of redesign and come up with a new product, it's around about 10, 15 years at market. So we have to build that in to continually improve it. So therefore, that's our main focus strategically. So to answer your question, when we're looking at the future, we're going, right, from Workiro's perspective, it can do this, this, and this. What we want it to be able to do, though, is the 65 terabytes that customer over there has currently got. We need to make sure that we understand exactly all of those millions of documents that customer is holding, and ensure that as we progress forward, that we can do things like, a great example in Australia is if they're not in Australia, you're not allowed to send a document out that's got a tax file number equivalent of our national insurance number. It's not allowed to leave the country. So how do you know that as a business when you've got email? So we're looking at challenges like that, where we can go back and go, hang on a minute, that PDF had a tax file number that matches a tax file number in our database that went out to a customer that looks like it has a domain that was in, I don't know, Singapore, for argument's sake. So all of that information is key, and that we're making sure that as we're going through, that we've got the ability to look back at the retro data rather than just new greenfield stuff, because in our world we are talking about terabytes of information, not just moving a customer record over a few lines over to a new system.
Yeah, absolutely, and I imagine that's something that customers are going to be really interested in terms of, you know, timing the jumping in. And getting started and making investment, and that's where I guess, you know, both the products that Workiro and you, Jabril, maybe you want to explore that a little bit in terms of from a product perspective.
Yeah, and I think for us, you know, the key element for us is really becoming, you know, trying to build out a platform that can really be, you know, a single source of truth. I think for finance teams, one of the key challenges, especially with legacy systems and manual processes, is that you've got a lot of information that's scattered in a lot of different places. And so trying to come up with, clear insights and clear decision making, you know, it takes a lot of time because you're pulling from disparate systems. And a lot of the information that you're not getting is real time. By the time you're getting to the decision, it's out of date, right? And so it's how do we, you know, pull all of that and become that single source of truth onto the platform to help out with things like receivables management, payments, and reconciliation, but more broadly, really to become a single source of truth as, you know, executives are starting to think through and start to make decisions that are going to really impact their business, right? And so for us, the key is, you know, really building a platform that seamlessly integrates with leading ERP and accounting systems, helps to pull all of this information onto the platform, creates kind of a seamless ability to be able to have everything all in one place, to be able to chase and get a lot of insights and things like that that'll help feed information for decision making process. And I think to the point around how that can help and inform future decision making, it really is about once you're able to pull all of that data into the platform, being able to continue to build on that, and be able to generate, real deep and meaningful insights around, your credit policies and the way that you approach, your financial decisions as an organization. And so that's, key for us and central to where we think, the applicability of AI and technology can really help CFOs and finance teams.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. So just a shout out to put any questions in the box. We'll go to Q&A shortly. I've just got one last question for each of you. What would be your sort of ideal sort of use case if I'm coming from as a customer to you? What would be my sort of ideal situation to take advantage of Kolleno and Workiro's products in the sort of Gen AI space?
I'll go first if you like. So from our perspective, we want to give businesses the ability to be able to fast track searching for information that's locked away in all of their current knowledge. So email conversations are a huge thing for us. We log and store emails and attachments from anyone. So even if you haven't sent the email, as long as you're in the same team and got the same permissions to be able to view them, it's a bit like someone giving you the email archive as an Oracle connection. So ultimately, what we want to be able to do is have Workiro to summarize and speed up your discovery of information about a client, supplier, or a particular matter or project that you're working on. And because of the nature of our business and the nature of our product, we rely strongly on integrations with ERP systems, CRMs, and practice management systems. So having that all embedded and tying in with that is a strong proposition for us, and that's great from a customer side as well. That's sort of where we're heading, and that's what our strong path is.
Right. There must be a lot of organisations in that, context, I imagine.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and I think closely linked to what Jason mentioned. I think for us as key is having those integrations. We've got integrations with a number of different kind of key accounting systems and ERP systems. NetSuite, QuickBooks, Xero. So our platform's able to pull all of that information and help provide kind of a consolidated view within our platform. And I think as we continue to evolve, it's how do we create a toolbox or a toolkit that CFOs and finance teams can utilize to generate the insights that they need to help with their accounts receivable management, how they manage their payments, how they manage their reconciliation processes, and help to streamline that and automate it to make it as easy for finance teams to get the information that they need and help with their decisioning and the management of their working capital. And so that's ultimately what we're doing, and that's ultimately what we'll continue to do as we go forward. And as part of that, AI and the applications of AI and Gen AI will be fundamental, especially as the role of the CFO evolves and the finance teams, and we start to look at how we engage with how firms engage with their clients and external stakeholders as well.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, look, thanks both of you. Really appreciate those answers, and certainly learned a lot.
Certainly, maybe we'll invite while people are writing some Q&A questions. Francis, maybe handing it over to you to talk a little bit about how are you seeing it from a BDO perspective? I mean, you're working with a number of different clients that are considering this as well. What are you seeing, especially within the finance realm? What are some kind of key use cases that are really starting to pique your clients' interests?
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting perspective is around how do you control it. So obviously, within the benefits are clear. I think a lot of organisations already have some sort of usage of it, but not necessarily with a sort of design intent. So there's a shadow IT is maybe too strong, but there's certainly a lot of sort of Gen AI that's been sort of penetrated organizations and has been used in various ways across the organization, and without sort of clear control, and that is very sort of classical within the work that we've been helping clients with for years, in terms of setting out your entity level controls around policies, guidance, guidelines, design intent, and then the sort of business process level, so where clients are using it within their organization, ensuring that it's doing what they think it's doing. Much as robotics, several years ago was similarly sort of leveraged quite quickly within finance functions, but quite quickly, people change, and if there's not good documentation or not good monitoring, before you know it, the organization doesn't really know what the robotics is supposed to be doing and can't check that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So that level of control, and then just on the sort of foundation sort of IT level, making sure that if you don't, for example, allow your organization employees to be using ChatGPT, that they're not. So port monitoring, and if they are using it, are they using it in line with the terms of use? So helping clients with a sort of health assessment, understand what the landscape actually looks like, and then providing them sort of recommendations on how they can apply this control. And I think that's what's fascinating about the sort of Bletchley Declaration. There had been this sort of gaping difference between the amount of use of the technology and the amount of sort of benefits that are being realised with it. Between that and actually retaining control on it. And from an organisation perspective, I think it's really crucial that context is understood, not least through the human element. And if there's not focus on that, then I think you can quite quickly lose human capital and not be able to replace it very quickly. And we've seen that with the sort of similar effect with COVID, with organisations having sort of laying off lots of people, and then finding it really hard to upskill the organisation. And people do provide the links and gaps within process and systems within organisations. And I think there's a high risk that by replacing people directly with Gen AI without thought for that you can create quite a resilience issue in your business without careful consideration. So that's what we're talking to clients about, quite a broad topic, and helping them solve that in lots of different ways. So I see we've got a couple of questions. So first question, the bigger the organisation, the less willing it is to change, and they are very happy to work in status quo. How do you see these organisations adopting AI and other automation tools rather? I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that, Jason, on the size and the scale.
Yeah, it's a great point. The good news is that a lot of tools that these larger organizations that are using, a lot of the applications and ERP systems and CRMs are exponentially investing in AI as far as the existing tools are concerned. So a lot of it will be easy to adopt compared to having to deploy new systems and new ways of working. It will complement their existing processes. So there'll be a lot of good stuff that can come with some easy switches, shall I say, where you can start to turn those things on and start to benefit from them. Like if you want to summarize the contents of a document for our application, that just came in a release and you started to be able to benefit from it. So I think from that perspective, if you're on legacy tools that don't have investment in AI and aren't talking about them, and I know it's the same thing, two letters over and over again, but if those partners and those applications aren't talking about AI, it's not a buzzword anymore. They're already left behind. So you need to look at applications and vendors that are, because then they'll take you on the journey with them and it'll be much easier to change.
Yeah, and I would really echo that point, Jason. It's especially for a lot of larger, kind of more well-established organizations, as you take a look around and you look at the competitive landscape, you have a number of new starters that are going forward and moving forward with AI as means of competing, and a lot of large organizations that are already taking steps to start to invest. And so I think part of it is really trying to figure out, what's that key first step for us as an organization, and how do we move to make sure that we're keeping pace.
Yeah.
Great answers. And I think there's going to be an element of the organization not having a choice. And the bigger I completely recognize the sort of oil tanker analogy, but I think the reality will very quickly would kick in, and the technology's really changed things at a rate that's unprecedented. And Larry's asked a question: how does this apply to a startup business that has 2 to 3 individuals? So I don't know, Jason, if that's one you can answer.
Yeah, sure. I mean, pick the right tools, Larry. And again, same answer to the large organization. A little bit easier when you've got 2 to 3 staff to pick some tools that are going to run your specific processes, and 2 to 3 of you can make sure you agree how you're using them. You don't have to have policies left, right, and centre. Just a decent agreement. But again, pick a vendor that's well known, that's got good track record, and try to limit the amount of tools you've got. Otherwise, you'll end up, as Francis says, with lots of shadow IT and people doing what they want on their own personal devices and stuff like that, in my experience at a business that size.
Great.
And I
well,
would
conscious
say,
of time. Oh, sorry, Jabron.
Sorry, no, and I would say, on top of that, you if you have the opportunity to build out, and you're starting out and you're building out your own stack, I would echo, Jason's point, but also say, at the same time, take a moment to have a clear idea of where you want to go, and try to invest in tools that are also going to scale and grow with you.
Yeah, and we've done several startups within our own business, Larry, that start off like that. Even though we're a large organization, we run small businesses within our own organization. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. We can share some experiences on what we did with those small projects as well.
And same here as well.
Yeah, scalability being key there. So look, I think we're out of time. Thanks very much for those questions. Benjamin, yeah, there will be a recording of this. We will share that. I guess thanks for all your time. Thanks, Jabron and Jason. Did you have any closing comments from either of you?
Not from me. Thank you very much for getting to the end of the hour. Appreciate
it. Yeah,
thank you very much
for joining, everyone, and stay posted, and do go and check out the Bletchley decoration, because it is I think a real game changer, not only in this space but just more broadly. So yeah, thanks all for dialing in, and have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.